The other day I put a video out asking for questions that folks may have about our channel, and one question that popped up that received the most interest, it seems, is about our chicken composting operation. How do we source the food scraps from the restaurants? Are we concerned about the quality? Is it something you can scale up or down? And so I thought I would spend a few minutes in this video and just share in a little bit more detail our particular system, not in any way saying, oh, it's the best or anything like that, but just here's what we're doing. 4.5 years in, it seems functional enough. You can take it and adapt it to your site. So stick with us and I'll address this particular question in more detail in this video. Most of you watching this video have already seen a lot of our chicken videos about composting. I'm going to link here to our playlist. If you haven't seen any of these videos, check those out. I don't want to spend a ton of time on that this morning, but we have a little over 60 chickens. We feed them almost entirely on food scraps and soil life. So we've got these huge piles of compost breaking down. Well, they're dwindling now, but the main question I want to address is, how do you source food scraps? How do you feed your chickens for low cost? We live near Ithaca, New York, and so we're lucky that there are a number of restaurants. There's a lot of interest in composting and, being green, that kind of stuff. And so it's relatively easy to approach people and say, hey, what are you doing with those food scraps? Or what are you doing with the leftovers? Can we have access to them? And what you're looking at right here is 1 week worth of compost from a particular catering company. And I just approached her directly. I called her up and said, look, we've got chickens. Is there any chance we can get your compost? This was 2 years ago. She said, oh, well, I've got a pig farmer picking it up, but I'll put you on the list for next year. And so this last year, we started a routine. We've been very reliable in coming to her site twice a week. We get 5-gallon buckets filled with her leftovers from kitchen prep, but then also leftovers from catering jobs. This is some really good stuff. For example, right in here, beans and rice and noodles. That's really amazing material for the chickens. The leafy greens are wonderful. So it's been a huge resource, and we've been very careful to make sure we wash the buckets, bring them back on time, communicate thoroughly with her so we can preserve that relationship. And so that's been a key ingredient to getting food scraps. Wherever you live, if there's a restaurant nearby or a catering company or a college or a school that ideally serves decent quality ingredients, contact them. There's no shame in just calling and saying, I've got chickens, I'm interested in composting your food scraps. If I bring you buckets once a week, twice a week, what's the rhythm they want? You put them in one spot, they fill them and leave them out there with lids, you pick them up and just make it very simple for them. It's an idea. If we had 2 or 3 restaurants lined up like this, I feel like we could probably feed our chickens without any other supplements beyond this. But let me pause for a moment and talk about some of the grain aspects that we work with. Quick side note before I forget. In that question, it was, hey, are you concerned about the quality of ingredients or specific ingredients? And I'll say yes to some extent. I'm not worried if I find lemon rinds and onion peels in here. The chickens are pretty smart about avoiding it. You can see some onion peels and that chicken is not eating them. So there you go, proof. But what I would like to avoid is if I were to connect with, for example, a diner or a restaurant, I would probably ask, hey, is it possible to take your coffee grinds and dump them in their own bucket? Those would be great in a worm composting system or in their own bin, but I generally am kind of bummed when I get a bucket full of coffee grinds. It mixes into everything and it's not great for our chickens. So I try to avoid that. And if a business sells really junky, cheap, GMO laden or CAFO meat type of food, we're so close to what these chickens are as far as eating their eggs or eating them. The quality of the ingredients, I try to go for something good, but whatever you can get, you can get. I talked about this in another video. This is on just the back of the chicken coop here, protected from rain and snow a little bit. We've got these galvanized garbage cans, which I think are great. I learned this the hard way, so if you're going to get into this from scrap, you should consider this. We put wooden bars on the ground underneath these to keep them up off the ground. Even though they're sealed, if they sit in wet soil or with snow banked against them for a while, they'll wick water and can ruin a whole container of grain. So do yourself a favor and maybe put some cinder blocks and post. But so far, no raccoons or opossums or mice or rats have gotten in here, so works quite well. What you're looking at in this one is, this is establishing a relationship. We're now really great friends. Farmer ground flour in the Finger Lakes, really wonderful organic grain milling operation. They make flour, and they have waste material that comes off of their milling operation, which they're now bagging up. So it's a real crapshoot. Sometimes it's just whole winter wheat, sometimes it's a lot of weed seeds, but it's pretty starch, carbohydrate dense, and we love it. We love that it's organic. It's up to you how you feel about that. I would encourage, if you're getting grain, seek out organic. A lot of wheat, a lot of those grain seeds, corn, that kind of stuff in conventional agriculture is really laden with glyphosate and all that kind of stuff. So see what you can do. Maybe there's an old-timey farmer, or is there Amish folks that aren't using spray where you live? But we get this, we trade for installing gardens and bringing them produce, bringing them eggs sometimes if that's what they want. And this material soaked in a bucket for a day or two sprouts, and we can add it to their system over there, and that adds a whole lot of extra carbohydrate and nutrient in that way. So we're not completely grain free. We do buy in millet and sunflower periodically, but ideally we're trying to work as much as possible with restaurant food scraps. An incredibly key ingredient to all this that I haven't even touched on yet is the woody biomass, or the carbon biomass. You can see there's a thick layer of wood chips in front of me here, and this pile that the hens are working on right now is loaded with leaves. These two resources can be completely free depending on where you live. Many people put bags of leaves out on the curb in the fall. Some people even pay to have them taken away. We collect as many as we can. We talk about this in greater detail in another video. This bulking material, not only does it help with the composting process, you really can't just put piles of food scraps. It'll get really sour and gross smelling. So you need that air and bulking material. But piles of wood chips and leaves on their own, left for a few weeks or a month, start having pill bugs and earthworms and millipedes, all sorts of soil life, and that may very well be the highest value food you can give to your chickens, are big warm compost piles that they don't have access to for a few weeks, and then you let them kick them apart. So maybe that's food for thought where you are. The wood chips, if you talk to local arborists, tree care people, even your highway department, and ask if they can dump chips at your site, that could be very helpful. We do that sometimes. And I also use my truck to load up with wood chips if I'm going downtown and I have an empty truck. I'll do that periodically. Another way that we're getting food scraps for our chickens, you can see these old totes, probably 20-gallon tubs. If they're completely filled, they're heavy. So you want to scale to the size that's comfortable for your body. And I invested $10 in these long rubber gloves. And when we're driving by our local food co-op, they have composting bins out back, and we'll poke around and see what we can get from there. What I'd like to do in the future is try to make an arrangement with their produce department, and this might be something to consider for yourself, is to talk with folks that run produce or meat departments or whatever you're comfortable thinking about sourcing for your chickens, and ask them if they can set it aside. It's kind of gross getting in there and rummaging around, but we'll fill up 4 of those every week, maybe twice a week, and a lot of times what I'll do is have my truck filled with wood chips and then put those tubs on top, so we can dump out the wood chips and then dump the food on top of that. Maybe throw in some grain that's been soaking in a bucket for a day or two. And those are some pretty excellent ingredients to keep our chickens healthy and happy, and pretty low tech, and it's a way of tapping into a waste stream. In this case, it's going to go to a composting operation, but why not pass through the chickens instead and be our compost? That's my preference. So the takeaway message that I'd like to impart to folks that are just getting into this is, feel comfortable just calling restaurants, food co-ops, schools, whatever is local to you or is on a driving path you already take, and see if it's possible to tap into their food scraps. Can you Ask them to partition out greens and things like that. Feel that out, see what feels comfortable. Talk to local companies that might have Woodchips, might be collecting leaves. Is there a relationship with them where they can be dumping that material close to you? Are there local farms that have waste hay or waste grain? Maybe there are manure piles at local farms that you can tap into. Are there people that would be happy to deliver it to you for a reasonable price, that you can support some local economy and some labor if you don't own a truck? And most importantly, I don't feel strongly that this system is an all or nothing. You may very well continue to feed your chickens the rations that you buy them and just have a little compost pile that they can work on and you hill up. And each time you take the material and scoop it and pile it up again, there's a renewed interest in your chicken. So it could be very small scale, it could just be an additional bonus for them instead of an all or nothing like our system where they basically, this is it, this is their feed. But it's worked for us for over 4 years. It continues to evolve. We'd love your feedback. And thank you so much for that particular question. Hopefully this has been useful or helpful to you. Feel free to ask further questions in the comments or have some dialogue with each other. What ways are you providing free or low-cost feed for your chickens? How's it working for you? Thanks so much.